Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for her time and attention to the subject of this debate this evening. On the 1st of October 1942, an unmarked Japanese freighter called the Lisbon Maru was carrying over 1,800 British and Allied prisoners of war, hundreds of them from the Royal Scots Regiment. The prisoners had been captured after the fall of Hong Kong and were destined for internment in Japan. Conditions for prisoners on this ship, and many freighters like it, were brutal and unsanitary. They became known as hell ships due to the suffering of those on board. For many, including the freighter, this was their final voyage. On that day, the Lisbon Maru was torpedoed by a submarine in the East China Sea. Whilst the Japanese troops on board the vessel were evacuated, the prisoners of war were locked in the ship's hold. As the vessel sank, many were trapped, and those who escaped were shot by the remaining guards on board or from nearby Japanese vessels. Many others were gunned down in the water whilst they desperately tried to survive. But amid this horror, a glimmer of humanity emerged. Chinese fishermen from nearby islands risked their lives to rescue hundreds of survivors and gave them shelter in their homes. Their efforts speak to a spirit that we know well, one that reminds us of our own Dunkirk evacuations, showing common humanity in the face of unimaginable horror. Now, this tragedy was not known to me until this year, when a constituent reached out. For Jerry Borge, his father, John, and Uncle Eddie's extraordinary experience on board the Lisbon Maru and their miraculous survival was a story he needed to share. Unfortunately, John and Eddie were recaptured and imprisoned for the remainder of the war, but they finally returned home, unlike so many others. Happy to give way.
Madam Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Bathgate and Lithgow for bringing this forward? She puts forward her story with so much passion and interest in her people, and we congratulate her on that. And as we again remember and pay tribute to the victory over Japan, just last week I went to an event to commemorate it. It is a very timely debate. I pay tribute to the Honourable Lady for her passion in establishing a fitting tribute. I support the Honourable Lady in this as she tries to achieve that goal. Does the Honourable Lady not agree that the tragedy resulting in the deaths of over 800 prisoners, many of whom were for Scotland, particularly areas like West Lothian, make a memorial seem appropriate, understanding the loss to families throughout Scotland that took place on the sinking of the Lisbon Maru, and just appropriate to do something like that just now?
I thank the Honourable Member for Strangford for his intervention, and it is a very important point and one that I will come on to make, but I wholeheartedly agree with his sentiment. Jerry wrote to me in a plea to shine a light on the tragedy which impacted many families when the Lisbon Maru sunk. Now, I spoke to Jerry last week in my office, and the message that he wanted me to convey this evening is a timeless message that even during the horrors of war, the actions of the Chinese fishermen exemplify the human instinct to reach out and to help our fellow human beings. Now, I know that many who experience conflict, particularly in the Pacific theatre, they never felt able to share their stories. Yet each town and village in this country will have its own relationship with conflict and a loss to remember. Honouring our history and the conflicts that have often defined it is something I believe Britain has done well over the years. The dedication of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and the monuments that we erect are a powerful legacy to the sacrifices made and lives cut short. However, it's also a promise that whenever one dies in conflict around the globe, they will be remembered back home for their heroism, their service and the legacy that they leave.
Should give way on that point.
Happy to give way.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend from Bathgate and Linlithgow for this debate tonight. A few days ago in my office, I met relatives of people who died on the Suez Maru, which was lost in very similar circumstances, around 550 prisoners of war on it, a great number of whom were machine gunned in the water by members of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The people I met, the relatives, their fight wasn't for a memorial. It was for, an answer from the government about why a war crimes trial didn't take place. And it's really, all these years later, it's a really emotive subject for them. One of the relatives was crying in my office, Madam Deputy Speaker. So it's really just a reminder that although years have passed, that ship was lost in 1943, the people can still be quite raw and quite emotional, and it's right that we reflect these losses, we remember these losses.
I thank my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for raising that really powerful and important point. People didn't come home from war, and people came home from war changed, not the same person who left. And I think we owe them a debt of gratitude, and we owe it to them to never forget the sacrifices they made and the legacy that they have left for us in securing our freedom. For the servicemen who died in the tragedy of the Lisbon Maru, including the 373 Royal Scots who perished, their deaths are a reminder of the historic contribution Scotland made to the war effort. 1 month from now, it will be the 83rd anniversary of this tragedy, but the commemorations this year have already begun. A few months ago, Jerry and several relatives of those who were prisoners of war attended an unveiling ceremony of a new memorial on Qingbang Island, southeast of Shanghai. It's greatly welcomed that their plight and story is recognised around the world. However, it is important that we remember it at home as well. The National... happy to give them.
Commend the Honourable Lady on bringing forward this debate and the fact that we were able to have a VJ-specific debate in this House, because I think one of the issues is that these events in the Far East are not as well known as they should be. Some of the horrors that happened there, I wasn't aware of this specific incident until I previously heard the Honourable Lady mention it. So I very much commend her, but does she agree that we must continue to bring out all the facts and the events of the Far East where Scotland played a particular role so that people understand the contribution and sacrifices that were made?
Kirsteen Sullivan. I'd like to thank the honourable member for the point that he's made, and he's made it very well. Indeed, my own grandfather served in Burma, and yeah, it's a story not really known in our family, and it was a story not told at the time. So I do think it is important that we bring these stories into the light, and we hear about the sacrifices that are quite unimaginable to many people of our generations. It's important that those continue to be told. Yes, the National Memorial Arboretum has a dedicated memorial to the Lisbon Maru tragedy, and it graciously hosts the families for a memorial ceremony every year, for which I know the relatives and the country are grateful. People have memorials in their communities to commemorate the personal loss of war and provide a focal point for remembrance. In a detached and inhumane conflict which seems far away, the consequences are felt by the empty seats round the dinner table at home. From the conflict of the Second World War, the world developed humanitarian law and more humane treatment of prisoners, which has underpinned our international community for decades. It is important that we recommit ourselves to learn these lessons, and as we heard throughout this evening, that we continuously strive to win the peace. The best way to remind ourselves and teach our young people is to show that the tragedies of war are universal and felt everywhere. A new memorial to the Lisbon Maru would be an excellent place to learn just that. The bravery of those men who suffered as prisoners of war, the bravery of the fishermen, but also the horrors of war that must not be repeated. My constituency is no stranger to powerful memorials. The Bathgate Hills hosts a memorial to those who died in the Korean War of the 1950s. And it is a beautiful, peaceful and sobering place to reflect on those killed, captured and maimed very far from home. Its presence encourages us to spark conversations with new generations about the lessons of the past and the sacrifices that were made for their future. My honourable friend, the Minister for Veterans and People, has been a welcome advocate in my constituency, not just with the new valour guarantees from this government, but his personal support for a local memorial to women in wartime working in hazardous conditions in a munitions factory. And whilst the dedicated work of Jerry and the Lisbon Maru Memorial Association will ensure that the legacy lives on, I ask the Minister this evening to consider supporting a new national memorial closer to home for the families of the Royal Scots, for those who survived, those who died and their rescuers. A memorial in Scotland will provide a space for families like Jerry's to share their stories and remember together. Finally, I'm going to end by thanking Jerry for sharing his family's personal story with me. A story of two young men far from home, facing inconceivable horrors, and for allowing me to record it in this place.
Minister, Kirsteen McNeill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Bathgate and Lithgow, on securing this debate on the potential merits of government support for a memorial to the Lisbon Maru. And can I congratulate her in particular for the very moving and evocative way that she told the story of this tragedy and of the shared humanity that was exhibited by those who came to the rescue. And let me also put on record our tribute to her constituent Jerry for recording his family's story. It must have been painful, but so incredibly important. Can I also thank the members for Strangford, Edinburgh South West, Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale for adding their own reflections to this debate, and all the honourable members that have stayed to listen to it this evening. I want to begin my own reflections by acknowledging and honouring the service and suffering of British and Commonwealth prisoners of war in the Pacific Theatre during the Second World War. As we've heard today, this issue has impacted many lives very, very deeply, including the families of the many Scottish servicemen who tragically lost their lives. And as the honourable member for Bathgate and Linlithgow has said, every constituency has a story to tell. So it's right that we remember all those who died, those who suffered appalling injuries and those who were tortured and imprisoned during this conflict. It's right that we thank them, and it's right that we recognise that they suffered deeply for our shared freedoms. Recently, I had the privilege of representing the UK Government at the VJ Day 80 service at the Edinburgh Castle, organised by the Royal British Legion Scotland. And I was deeply moved then to spend time with families recounting the stories of their own loved ones who'd served in World War II across all theatres. And I will never forget the stories that they told and the lessons that they imparted on the power of forgiveness, on service and on sacrifice. Similarly, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Scotland, met with World War II veterans Margaret Landals and George MacLeod during his recent visit to Ladyhaig's poppy factory for VE Day. And both of those significant national occasions are reminders of the price paid for our freedoms, and they both highlight the importance of standing alongside our allies, particularly, as we heard earlier, from the Secretary of State for Defence in continuing our support for Ukraine. The UK will always support Ukraine's sovereignty, freedom and right to peace. And that is something I had cause to reflect on personally when I attended the 3rd anniversary commemoration of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine at the Scottish National War Memorial. The Memorial at Edinburgh Castle honours all Scottish service personnel who have died in the service of their country and acts as a truly poignant symbol of Scotland's long-standing tradition of contributing to the UK's national defence. Scots in the armed forces, their families and their communities are rightly proud of Scotland's deep-rooted military history. Scots have a very long tradition of defending the UK's interests around the world. But beyond remembering our fallen heroes, we have a duty to ensure that veterans and their families today receive the support and care that they deserve, no matter where they live in the UK. And that's why this government has taken significant steps to deliver on our promise to renew the nation's contract with those who serve and who have served. So I'm proud that this government launched Op Valour, a transformative initiative backed by a £50 million commitment to veteran support. We also launched a £75 million LGBT financial redress scheme through Opasend. We're helping veterans thrive in their post-service careers, providing them with opportunities to succeed in the civilian workforce. But on to the specific subject of today's debate. The UK Government deeply regrets the loss of life which occurred on the Lisbon Maru and the resulting distress caused by the decision not to pursue a case against those involved. The Government of Japan has acknowledged and shown contrition for its wartime actions on numerous occasions over the past several decades, including from past Prime Ministers and Emperors. Since the Second World War, the UK and Japan have continued to work hard to promote our shared democratic values and respect for human rights, in the hope that we will never, ever see a repeat of these events anywhere in the world. I saw this closeness of our modern partnership when I visited Japan only last month. There is, as the Honourable Lady mentioned, rightly, a memorial located at the National Memorial Arbitrium in Staffordshire, which commemorates all those who were taken captive and those who perished. Now, every year on October 2nd, there is an annual gathering at the memorial to remember and honour those who were affected by this tragedy. I would also like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to the Lisbon Maru Memorial Association for their own dedicated work in preserving the history of the events surrounding the sinking of the Lisbon Maru and in honouring all those who were aboard her. As heritage is a devolved policy area in Scotland, any funding of such memorials remains the preserve of public subscription driven by individuals and organisations. I therefore do encourage the Scottish Government to consider how it can best support efforts to commemorate those in Scotland affected by the tragic events of the Lisbon Maru, ensuring that the memory of the 183 servicemen from the Royal Scots Regiment who lost their lives is truly honoured. Now, I know that my honourable friend, the Minister for Veterans and People, engages regularly with the Scottish Veterans Commissioner, who advocates for veterans living in Scotland and influences policymakers on matters affecting veterans. All our governments must continue to work together on how we appropriately honour and remember the past. So in closing, let us remember that our commitment to veterans is not just a promise, it is an ongoing, deep obligation. It's our responsibility to honour their service, acknowledge their sacrifices, and most of all, preserve their memories for future generations. So together, we will continue to build a future where every single veteran receives the care, support and opportunities that they rightfully deserve.